we become so intellectualized, we become so stiff in our responses to the events around us. Have we lost something in terms of our personality, our emotions, our feeling of passion, of excitement, of awe at events? Does that go by the by as a result of becoming a cultural anthropologist? You are Professor Emeritus of Anthropology at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee.
Right.
And how old are you?
I'm 80.
What do you understand from the invitation that this interview is all about?
To be honest with you, I haven't the foggiest idea because it is on a subject, excuse me, I've given very little thought to.
The title of the study, as you know, is The Final Participant Observation. Cultural anthropologists confront their mortality. What was it, or what is it about the title that intrigues you to agree to be interviewed?
I think because I thought perhaps you might have a very good sense of humor, because that's something I need when I'm thinking about anything like death or getting older or leaving my children or grandchildren or whatever, never being able to see them married or something like that, you know. So I think that when you're funny about it, it makes it better, easier.
You have written and spoken about the importance not just of studying the other, but of being the other.
That's right, the practitioner.
And right now, you are the other.
Yes, and I'm a practitioner because I practiced being 92.
Do you see death as the final reality?
See what? Death?
Is that the end of it all?
I have no idea. But I don't know whether I believe in a heaven or not. I did as a child. But now I just feel that death is probably the end.
How the anthropology has affected me in terms of living and dying. It has given me a knowledge of people in two separate cultures in addition to my own.
Mortality, how has anthropology affected that? That's a really tough question for me.
What do you think we are here to interview about?
That you were interested in seeing how anthropologists who'd reached seniority and may even have outlived many of their contemporaries viewed the coming of death.
Would it be fair to say then that because of your genetic inheritance and because of your high level of energy, that you still are not confronting the reality of aging and dying?
I've only done that at all in the last 2 or 3 years.
How do you feel about the theme, octogenarian anthropologists and their final participant observation confront their aging and mortality?
Well, obviously it's something that everyone looks forward to. I mean, everyone knows it's coming. No one looks forward to it, you know, with pleasure. But it's not something I look forward to with horror. I mean, here's one way in which anthropologists, I think, are better off than the average person. I have no concerns about what happens to me after I die.
It's funny, I'm not sure that I ever really thought that I've aged. Almost always I've been in a situation in which I was the youngest person. And then situationally, though I've been married for close to 60 years, we've had no children, So I've never seen next to me anybody aging except my wife. You know, I know that I'm 83 years old, and that's old. At least certainly back when I was growing up, one never conceived of anybody being 83 years old. But I don't feel old.
Evolution is only concerned with our living long enough to launch the next generation successfully, whatever species we are. And in the case of human beings, it doesn't matter once you get beyond 30 or 40 whether you live 10 years or 60 years. It's chance, and all you can do is be very grateful if you live a long time and in good health.
How does the culture concept help you to deal with your illnesses, with your medications, with the doctor?
Two ways. My intellectual culture indicates that you go to the stats as opposed to praying, as opposed to some kind of magic thought. No, I go to the stats. Tell me what the stats say, and I have some idea what it's all about. Culturally, I'm aware of my condition, and I don't want to interject myths, prayers, icons. I know from experience that most people end up doing that when they have life-threatening diseases. I don't. You live with what you've got, and the attitude is fuck it. What's going to happen will happen. The question is, how do you deal with that last stage? Basically, I try not to. I have a wife that's 20 years younger than me. I have a 18-year-old daughter who August 16th goes into the Israeli army. So I'm not ready yet to say it's all over. What you deal with is the damn body lets you know you're over 80.
At age 80, I have an arthritic back and neck. I have spinal stenosis. But aside from these issues, my health is pretty good.
I took out a statement from your book, from a spiritist. And the spiritist says, "Science can answer many questions, but when faced with death, the scientific worldview either responds with silence or suggests skepticism." You quote that, and as I recall from the book, you leave open your own reaction. Can you define your reaction a little bit more precisely now?
My own reaction is that in this sense, I still see the anthropologist as the fly on the wall, studying what other people do and what other people think. As a result, what I think is not part of the equation, is not part of anything I write about. I do this in terms of the people I study. And as I say, I don't give much thought to this for me. My real feeling is that one day it'll come to an end and that will be it.
In your living will, did you stipulate no heroic interventions? Yes. You stipulated that?
Yeah.
Well, it seems to me you have given thought. When you made your living will stipulations, did you consult a physician at all?
If I make this personal, what I would say to you is that I don't know many physician friends who know any more about this issue than I do in terms of making a decision. I don't think the medical profession in any way teaches or advises doctors, surgeons, etc., on these issues.
Would you go to some concept of anthropology if you were to have such a diagnosis?
Okay. I guess that anthropology, as I learned it and understand it, looks at the process in terms of other people. But biologically, we come to an end. This is all we know. And this is perfectly acceptable to me. As I say, if I needed something in any kind of hypothetical situation that you want to construct, I can always rely on Spiritism. And I can always say that if they're right, there's another world. When I go from this one, there's a spirit world where I will meet all of the people I have known and have been dear to me who are now in the spirit world. Okay.
As an anthropologist, how has that shaped your thoughts about an afterlife, about reincarnation, about anything at all? Do you anticipate an afterlife?
I don't know what's there. It doesn't do me any good to anticipate or not anticipate, because I'm not going to know even if that were the case.
Do you pray?
Mm-hmm.
And to whom do you pray?
I pray to God.
And what's your idea of God?
I don't make ideas much of what's in the afterlife, because I don't know. And it doesn't help any to speculate on that question. So I don't try to make, I don't try to try to go the route of imagining things that I don't know about.
In your work in field anthropology,
Yes.
have you encountered spirits?
Yes.
And do you think that that was a spirit manifestation, or was it sleight of hand?
It was. Vic thought it was sleight of hand. But
Your husband thought it was sleight of hand,
saw this
Victor.
thing done in the 1980s.
He thought sleight of hand.
Sleight of hand. No, I didn't. I was watching carefully.
Funny.
Mm-hmm.
Funny because final participant observation.
Yes, it's very
funny.
funny.
Is that funny?
Yes.
Why is it funny?
Because first, you don't ever know it's final, and second, you're doing it all the time, so it's always the end. It'll always be the end. I mean, take a look at Margaret Mead. She had a channeler, and that woman and Margaret Mead had such fun, according to Mary Elder. Mary Elder was with Margaret Mead for the whole last of her life, meaning when she was ill. And she's a nurse. And she wasn't there as a nurse, she was there as an anthropologist, and they were doing her work at the same time Margaret Mead was getting ill. But they had a lot of fun.
You say this woman was a channeler?
Channeler.
And what did you mean by channeler?
I'm not sure, but that she was able to channel through herself things about Margaret Mead, about Margaret and how. I don't know. I think nobody's ever asked me that question.
Well, when we think about channeler, we mean someone who is in touch like a shaman with supernatural entities, with spirits. Did Margaret Mead believe in spirits?
I think, she believes in anything that people tell her of that sort, sure. She was Protestant, very serious churchgoer. And that's why she was buried in a church and went through all that, But
So
whether
she
she
had a
believed or
channeler.
not, I don't know. The channeler, I think, had a good deal to do with her getting better or being not out of pain or something like that.
And did you meet the channeler?
No, I never met her. Mary Elder did. She's a woman who, she was chauffeuring Margaret around, you know, and doing things like that for her. But she also was, she was a nurse, so it was helpful.
Are there any field experiences, anthropological, academic concepts, things that you have integrated as a result of your fieldwork rites of passage that inform the way you think about aging and dying now?
The only way in which I think my field experiences have affected my perception of this idea, mortality and death, is the good friends who dealt with this in their own ways, and how I learned what they thought about it. And those experiences were actually quite sad, because those dear friends whom I was close to as death approached them were wistful, I think most of all in the way that I feel it, and also they were in pain. And that combination of the pain and the gradual loss of consciousness gave to their deaths an air of sadness, which I suppose almost always accompanies the death of people if it's a slow process. I was very struck in the time that I spent in Hong Kong, where I was interested in food behavior, at how people wanted to eat food that transmitted life, that transmitted the substance.
Symbolically or
yes,
nutritionally? Symbolically.
Symbolically. But that meant, for instance, fish, the price of fish began to fall by the middle of the day. Fresh caught fish, by noon we're selling more cheaply. And that people would carry live fish home in little plastic bags full of water. The feeling that the food that was fresh made you live, maybe even made you live longer.
What did you learn about yourself, apart from how to take accurate descriptive notes?
That I could do it, and that I could interpret what I was putting down, that I could make sense of what I was doing. And no one had ever done that in that place with people like that before. I was learning what my skill was that defined me. I was learning that work is the way we identify ourselves, the way we vindicate ourselves, the way we make ourselves real. I hate the word empower, but that's what is involved. I thought, why was it? The Army didn't make me feel grown up. Getting my BA certainly didn't. And I had an early marriage. None of that made me feel like an adult. What made me feel like an adult was having a profession, having something that I did and that I would be known for as an individual, as a person, as a mature person. And I don't think that I had that feeling before I did the field work, but as I was doing it, I began to feel that.
Do you ever stop being an anthropologist?
No, not even when I dream. No, I don't stop being an anthropologist. And to say being an anthropologist and trying to impart to it meaning is simply, among other things, I think, knowing how to shut up. One of the experiences in the field that has moved me repeatedly is, if you go to the field eager to find out, and you transmit your eagerness to the people from whom you must learn it and whose trust you must win, and you devote time to how you feel and how to articulate, to communicate how you feel. As I aged, I found that my distance from the field was growing. I have, over time, gone to meetings less. Sadly for me, most of my friends have died off.
Do you feel you have any special wisdom?
I begin by saying I'm a lot smarter about my own foibles and foolishness, which is not to say I'm much smarter about how to control them. I know my weaknesses better than I did before.
So do you think that's true, that when it comes to aging and denial, as long as we have our senses, that we deny it because it's too difficult for us to deal with ourselves as we deal with the other in the field?
No, that would be weakness. And I don't consider myself weak. In dealing with informants, I've had difficult informants. And you know what I say? There are a lot of informants in this community. I don't need to talk to this guy. That's been my attitude.
What have been the influences that lead you to think the way you think now that you have expressed?
Well, by far the principal scientific influence has been Leslie White. I went to the University of Michigan virtually not having heard of anthropology, and I majored in political science. I was supposed to inherit my father's business, and after graduation, I did start working with him, thinking that that would be my life's work. But after 5 months, I realized I wasn't cut out for that. The business was not for me. I had taken a couple of courses from White as a senior and realized that's something I really liked, and that's what I wanted to do. So I went back to Michigan for graduate work. Next to White, in terms of influence on me, was Herbert Spencer, whom I sort of rediscovered. I mean, he's gotten a bad press because people don't realize, in addition to his conservative political philosophy, there was a lot of very sound, very insightful social science in his book, The Principles of Sociology. And those two have been easily the two most important intellectual influences on me.
We're talking about aging and dying.
Yeah, well, it's not something that I've thought very much about, certainly not dwelled on, and though the influences that I just mentioned have nothing to do with aging and dying as I see it.
Well, your first field work was?
With the Kwikuru in central Brazil.
And did you encounter attitudes toward aging and death at that time?
Well, let's see. There was no one who was really very old, except this one man who was maybe in his 60s, who was partially lame, but who was well taken care of by his son. And in fact, the older people are dealt with pretty well in that society. But, well, of course, they, as with most primitive peoples, don't worry about the afterlife because it's curious. The way you die is more significant to what happens to you later than the way you lived. For instance, the Kwikuru have 3 afterworlds. One for most people, one for people who died a violent death, and one for people who died by poisoning. And obviously it's important to them how you die, where you go. But in each case, life there is pretty much like life here. There's no punishment, no reward. You just go on more or less the way you were, except, you know, at a different level.
Does that way we have of separating ourselves from the other, does that carry over into our own lives?
Well, I guess it depends on what brand of anthropologist you have in mind. The postmodernists certainly, well, I wrote an article in which I tweaked postmodernism And I characterize them, some who have written about it, as they're observing their subject and taking their own pulse. They're more interested in how they're reacting to what their informants are saying than they are about what the informant is saying. A lot of my thinking and my behavior, I think, is not as an anthropologist. It just, I react to things the way it seems to me appropriate in the circumstance without thinking, I'm an anthropologist, therefore I have to think in a certain way.
No, I'm not saying that we consciously think, oh, I'm an anthropologist and therefore I think in a certain way. I'm saying that we develop a habit of objectifying our situations and thereby reducing our awareness of ourself.
Well, I think, yeah, I can. Looking at a situation objectively is probably something that anthropology helps put into you, more so than the average non-anthropologist. That you might be in a situation which you're personally involved in, it's uncomfortable or even dangerous, but you at times sort of step away and say, this is, yeah, I'm in it, but I could step away and look at it and say, this is interesting, and it has these components and these determinants and so on. And you're looking at it again as an anthropologist looking at something external to you.
What do anthropologists become more of as a result of facing the end of life?
I don't know many, if any, anthropologists who would fit that, would be in that first type, who would become more religious, who are religious. Maybe that's because they're anthropologists. I don't. One never talked about formal religion. We did make fun. It was interesting on this thing. Margaret Mead, Madame Anthropology in her own way, who was my professor and my colleague for many years, and I loved her as acerbic as she was in many different ways. But it's fascinating. You would see her at a memorial service. They're always held at St. Paul's, the chapel, Columbia over here, for the New York types. And she'd be on her knees. And, you know, we were all young and a little punky, and, you know, we would snicker a little bit. There was Margaret Mead on her knees. You know, I don't remember whether she was doing the sign of the cross, which would be a good Greek thing, but maybe others, but there she was. And very and defiant about it. That was the thing about Mead. She didn't kid around when she did. I know that she was, I think, an Anglican, and how observant she was, I have no idea. But she was the closest thing that I ever saw to do anything religious, as you know, among anthropologists or by anthropologists. Even down to, you know, at death. But beliefs, that's something else. That's, I don't know, you know, it's difficult. Anyway, my own experience has been that we very rarely talked, or if ever really talked about it. Even at times of stress or crisis or something. Well, you know, it's interesting. The expression of the one expression that you might do at times of crisis or something for a Greek, or I guess a Catholic also, it's the same, really fundamentally was the same thing. You know, a quick cross, though of course thousands of people have been killed on either side of the Eastern and Western churches on which way you make that cross. I mean, you know that the Eastern do it right to left, the Catholics and do it to left to right, right? Anyway, all I'm saying is, on occasion I don't find myself doing that, but you know, kind of thinking it would be nice at this time to do this. A friend of mine has died in bed while the lights are out. Maybe I could, maybe what that means to me, I'm not sure.
We've been looking backwards, and we're looking forwards to the end of life. What would you say is the aspect of your life that is most central to you, the characteristic, the identity, which is most central to you in terms of who you are?
What I did is maintain the one thing that I prized most, that is that I continued being an anthropologist of sorts, and that I do teach in my own way. I don't say I'm the greatest charismatic anything in the world, but I do have, I do think every once in a while I get something across that has been of some value to a few people that they won't be able to use. I owe that to anthropology in this sense. And if you want to push it further to your thing, I owe it to my first and continuing participant observations, which, and if you really pushed me on this thing, I would say my entire life, whether I knew it or not in the beginning, was a participant observation. I always tried somehow to understand, but to fit in to the thing while understanding. And that I think is the prime characteristic of a productive, or by productive I don't mean you just write articles, or articles will do it, or books will do it, but understanding, that is kind of anthropology.
Your whole life has been one, up until, as I understand it, has been one of participant observation.
Yes, technically correct. What I tell from talking to you over a drink, the street has always drawn me. As a kid in grammar school, I was never a good student. The street. I was always connected to the street in one form or another. And that participant observation, yeah, but that was part of what I was doing. You had to know the culture. And in every case, it was a different culture. It was 2 months ago that the police in Chicago said that I had to retire, 80, 81 years old. They said, we can keep you forever, but the insurance company won't insure you anymore. So I had 15 years walking a beat. That's a street.
You grew up as a participant observer. Did you always take an objective view of what you were doing and being involved in?
I do a great deal of writing in the shower, in the bathroom. It's all in my head. A combination of being active and probably a lack of discipline. I can't tell you how many times people have said, hey, are you going to write that up? Are you going to do that? What you did with the Rangers, what you did with this? And what it would have been is the best I could be was the beloved other. And I think my success was built on the fact I never attempted to be black or Indian or Hispanic, but beloved other is about the best you can do. The beloved other comes when I'm doing work as an anthropologist, and it's very clear to me that the mistake many, many liberals are making is trying to be the beloved same. That was an important part. If you're working with a group, you have to be who you are, respect their culture, but understand their culture.
If the stats and the physician says you only got 6 more months to live, what would be your reaction?
If I only had 6 months to live?
Yeah.
Explain it to my daughter, take my wife, and let's go party somewhere. Or what do you want me to do with 6 months to live? I'm not ready to sit down and wait. Fuck it, let's go to Paris, or we like Rome.
How much of that response is the street level growing up response and the intellectual and experiential aspect of your life?
It's both. The intellectual is what says, look at the stats, try to make a rational decision. The street level, I've told my son when he was a kid, I've told other people, if it's really important for me, I can and have given papers at the equivalent of Harvard. I can talk that talk. I'm very pleased to say I can go into a longshoreman's bar tonight and pass. I can go to cops bar. In Chicago, you have bars that only cops go to and pass. If I really want to make myself known, which in some large part I'm doing now with you, I have no reason not to be me, then I revert to who I was. I was a working class guy.
Have you made a living will?
I hadn't thought of that. And of course, in Israel, there's the whole issue with the rabbinate of what you can do or can't do. I would not be adverse to pulling the plug. You know.
And do you believe in God?
No. How can you be an anthropologist and believe in God? I didn't go to Israel to retire. I went to make a contribution. I didn't retire from Northeastern. I left Northeastern. Well, now I'm in a quandary because I don't believe in God and I don't know how to daven. So what the hell am I doing? So I became the shamash and the shomer. I'm the guard. I'm the security for the shul. So every Saturday I'm outside protecting the shul, and that satisfies me.
Has being an anthropologist, a Quaker, a woman, an anthropologist, has that for you determined how you feel about supernaturalism, religion, spirituality, the unknown? Has that shaped the way you are confronting?
I think so.
And how does that?
I think that because of the Quaker part and the anthropological part has been very helpful in having me feel that that whatever's going to happen, I can cope with it, and it keeps me, I don't feel worried about dying, except want to be sure I have the plans made and know it might be any day. But hope it won't, because I have too many things I want to get done.
What else do you want to get done?
I want to finish my memoirs for my grandchildren. I enjoy seeing my friends. I don't have a, well, of course, I was on the founding board of Planned Parenthood here, and we're having a fight now. I mean, I have to participate. I write my letters to the editor. We have a very, very bad governor right now who's cutting everything. And I can't stand, I keep wanting to go and carry my banner, you know, in the demonstrations, but I decided that I shouldn't do that, particularly with my leg, because we've had several demonstrations. But I feel I'm still participating in things. I haven't withdrawn.
Do you think we have anything to say that is meaningful to those who are about to become anthropologists?
I don't know. I guess that what we can share is the work we've done and show how we've used anthropology, or the life we've lived, and how anthropology has helped us make more contributions than we could have made without it. I know when I worked for the Quakers in World War II, I was invited to do that particularly because I had studied public administration and social work at Chapel Hill, for instance. And most of the volunteers had had been business people, teachers or something, and so they wanted someone who had training in public administration and social work. And it helped me very much in France, was I worked with because I helped design a program where we work with the French agencies, and knowing something I could be literate talking to them about. But then when I came back, I realized that I didn't have the cultural, I didn't understand their cultural. I understood how their agencies work, but that's why I went back into anthropology, to fill that gap. And I think that's what was a great help to me in understanding other countries. And for instance, I was the first person hired as an anthropologist to demonstrate what anthropology could add to the World Bank. So I tried to add the human dimension, because they were only looking at economics. And so I tried in the first, I did the first sociocultural evaluation, and I put in people, what's happening to the people who are there, the people who come in. You know, this is what anthropology added to it.
Well, I don't think that cultural anthropologists have a mortgage on observing life as it is and growing old. I don't, even though my emphasis in my own research and studies has been in cultural anthropology, I don't think of myself as a cultural anthropologist. I think of myself as an anthropologist.
Four-field anthropologist.
A four-field anthropologist. That you bring in the insights from all the fields. And certainly as I've gotten older, in terms of, I may express it in cultural terms, but my understanding of what's going on, not just with myself, but the fact of an aging population and what this means, what it's going to mean economically, and how it has come about that we've overcome so many childhood diseases and so on, that people as a whole are living longer. This draws as much upon biological anthropology and biology generally as it does upon the cultural consequences of this fact.
How do you look at participant observation in this assisted living home? And you can phrase it completely, man.
As a participant observation as the method of cultural anthropologists or ethnologists, I've done this all the time, wherever I was, wherever I live. And as I'm older and have made this really life-changing decision to move into a retirement community where I'm surrounded by people, all of whom are as old or older than I am, some of them considerably younger, which surprises me. I'm just doing what I've always done. But it's also made me think a great deal more about the broader picture of the whole population, that we're outnumbering younger people, what this is going to mean economically for our society, a whole matter of Social Security, Medicare, all of these questions. Also the question that is, I think, on many people's minds is, as I have said on other occasions, I don't fear dying, I fear not dying, with the efforts to keep people alive, being unproductive to the world in general, and certainly not enjoying themselves. I think that we're going to have to face some very, very serious questions and decisions. This whole matter of how long you keep people alive, why you keep them alive. I think more and more people are going to have to make the decision themselves to tell whoever represents them, children or others, the point at which they really don't want to go on, when the game, as they say, ain't worth the candle. And I think more and more people who got picked off with sudden heart attacks and incurable cancers and that sort of thing are going to have to make this kind of decision, prepare themselves to make it. And I think it's something that perhaps we should be studying. We should be having seminars. And I see this as a major, major question in the next 20, 30 years, if that long. I won't live to see it, but I'm seeing the beginning of it, and I think it's something we should be alerted to. And I think this is where perhaps anthropological insights are particularly useful as a participant observer.
How would you describe yourself in this area of belief?
Well, I have long ago abandoned any kind of conventional belief. I'm like the person who gave up believing in God and the afterlife and the saints, but believed in baptism. I've seen it done. And that's about the extent of my belief.
You believe in baptism?
Yeah, because I've seen it done.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I'm being facetious. No, I'm being facetious. I don't believe in baptism in terms of the afterlife. I just believe in dribbling the water on a kid's head. I've seen it done. So that I believe in.
Okay.
But no, I'm not a particularly, I don't know what people mean by spiritual. I don't believe in an afterlife. I'm perfectly content with the immortality of being recycled, and I will go on. And so I have no fears of what might be there. And I've been so fortunate to have lived a very satisfactory life, exciting, had its bad times, but these are tests too, that I'm content. From one day to the next, I'm where I wanted to be. I'd like to go on and on, but I don't expect that. So as long as I'm even with the game, I'm content. So I really, anthropology as a discipline and giving tools to understand what's going on around, to me is, if I have a religion, that's my religion too. I'm interested in how people across the world relate to mortality and their expectations and how their living culture sort of defines and outlines what might lie beyond. I have particular respect for, and this I learned from my Ho-Chunk friends, the idea of reincarnation. If there's anything else, this to me seems like the most logical because it's a form of recycling.
When I bring back to your attention that I'm talking about aging and mortality, how did you feel about that?
Well, actually, I think my field, well, the fact that as I matured, in some ways I didn't have to justify my research as much because I'm now sort of like una tia, an auntie, or a grandmother. And so people really treated me with more respect. I mean, I didn't have to justify myself as much as I did when I was younger. That's on aging. Now, on mortality, they had a very, what I'm going to refer to in stereotype as a Mexican attitude. It's a normal part of life. We have to deal with it. And so insofar as I've thought about mortality, and you have some resistance on my part, as maybe you do with all of us who get to be 80 plus, of even thinking of yourself as being old.
Do you think about preparing for your end?
I have, only in the sense that I'm finally trying to get stuff in order.
Get your stuff in order.
So that I have 4 nephews, and I don't want them to come here and say, what do we do with these books? I probably have 10,000 books downstairs in the basement here. You know, that's our life, Philip, isn't it? I was in the field in Mexico every single year from the 1950s on. Every single year, or one other part of Latin America, if not Mexico.
Did you encounter dying and death and funerary rites in Mexico?
Yes, of course, but it was all taken, and maybe this is partly why I'm maybe trying to apply it to myself.
As aging is now a part of your life.
Yes. And
death is sooner rather than later, only in terms of life expectancy. We're both, I'm 86, and I think you will be 86 in June.
I think you're probably right.
Right.
And that may be something of denial.
Right. Have you made preparations for your funeral, for your living will, for your last encounter with the medical profession?
I have a living will. But I also have started thinking about, because I'm leaving most to these 4 nephews who now have lots of kids, or several grandnieces and nephews. And I realize what a mess I'm going to leave them.
What are you refusing in your living will?
What am I, what?
Refusing to have done to you.
Oh, I don't want any extreme measures to keep the body pumping. So I'm refusing any kind of extreme care at the end, but that's the only thing I think I'm refusing.
Including hospice care?
I didn't even mention that.
Do you have any physical kind of limitations now?
I'm sure, of course I do. I don't have any at this point that keep me from walking naturally or wearing high heels now and then, which I don't think I should, but always when I taught, I carried my high heels in my briefcase, took them out and put them on before I went in to teach. And it slowed me down just enough that I did feel more dignified when I taught if I had my high heels on.
As a result of your anthropological experiences, your reading, your life,
Yes.
your energy, do you have any thoughts about spirituality, transcendence, God, immanence? How do you think about those things?
Sir, I have a book I'm going to give you. It's called The Making of Saints, and I've got a paper in there which sort of summarizes, and it came out in 2005, so it sort of summarizes many of the things but all the people I work with are mediums who go into trance, or many of them are, go into trance, receive spirits, and do their healing as a result. And so I was working with American spiritualism before I actually came to realize how prevalent and how historically related it is to Latin America.
Are you an atheist?
No, I think that takes as much defense as being a believer. And I think it's just as hard to defend. I think agnostic would be a better word, perhaps.
Do you pray?
No. And you mean in a very personal sense of, no, I don't.
So you would characterize yourself as an agnostic?
Yes.
And did you...
I think so. I mean, I hope we have the same meaning for that word. One who can't...
Well, the meaning that I have for agnostic is the meaning that I derived from my father. When we would go to the Jewish synagogue,
oh yeah,
I would say, "Pa, why are we going here?"
Uh-huh.
And he would say, "Well, you never know."
Ah, well, okay, that's very interesting.
That's
very
an agnostic for me.
Yeah, and that's the kind of agnostic I think I am.
How do we feel about this last
well,
part
as an
of our
anthropologist,
lives?
I could turn this around and ask you the same question.
Go ahead.
Which is what I would do.
Do it. Ask me.
Well, how do you feel about your mortality?